It's been a month since our last trip to the farm, but we're going to continue the Great Farm Cleanup series with this episode, episode 17, at my place. But we're going to sort out some of the stuff we got last trip and put a couple of things on eBay that might do well. Do a few cleanups as well also. Hey guys, Chris from The Ultimate Recycler, and one of the other reasons we're not going back to the farm yet is my van is still chockers full from the great shed clean out I did recently here. There's a series on that, the workshop clean out. Big job, going to be processing for a while. I'll do another update on that series shortly. But in this video, we're going to go through some of the scrap we brought back from the farm, a lot of brass plumbing fittings, you remember. I'm sorting a few out here. I'll show you how I'm processing that. We've got a few things to clean up and just value add a little bit before we sell them in the shop. And we're going to put something pretty unusual on eBay and just see how we go there. Let's have a look at the scrap first. A lot of the scrap was in boxes and crates and I just dropped it in the carport, so it's time to process it because the carport is out of control and we've got to get onto that. We'll go and have a look there shortly. Now a lot of this stuff I cleaned out from Dad's shed is plumbing fittings and a lot of it is just very clean straight brass, so not much mucking around there. I'm just putting that into little tubs for now and tipping it into buckets, and I'm going to weigh up about 20 kilos per bucket before I go to the scrapyard in Melbourne. So there's quite a lot of brass here. I'm just going to make sure it's nice and clean. And of course, the magnet is a scrapper's best friend, but also there's pieces like this that neither are magnetic, but you've got a brass flange nut there and we've got some copper pipe. It is actually chromed, but it is definitely copper pipe. And if you're unsure, a nice sharp file is a great way to tell copper. You get that nice pinkish look underneath and it's very soft. The file really grabs on it. So we're going to sort, I'm just putting stuff in this orange bucket that I have to clean up, but anything that's clearly just straight brass I'm just pulling out for now, and it reduces the pile quite a bit. There's lots of old tap fittings, lots of broken fittings, some old gate valves, but it's not worth trying to clean them up and fix them. That's got a bent spindle on it anyway. If they're good clean ones and they're close to being usable, I might just clean them up and I'll sell them as a going tap, as a bit of copper. The chromed copper will go as number 2, but there's a clean bit there that can go as candy copper. A little bit better price, not a great deal. That's another one that could probably nearly go as candy copper. It is a bit dull and dirty, but it's still clean. There's no corrosion, there's no paint, there's no chrome. So it's just a bit of sorting here, which actually I find quite enjoyable. Now that all clean stuff is sorted, we've got to clean up some stuff in this tub. Copper pipe I usually cut with a hacksaw. It's extremely soft and it's not much of an effort to cut through. As you can see, and if you cut through just back behind the flange nut, you can get that off. So copper, brass, copper, easy done. Now some of these bigger pieces are a big effort to try and undo. So we've got a piece there that's brass, and we can tell that with the hacksaw, so it's nice and yellow. Also, of course, our magnet can tell brass from steel. So we need to take this steel elbow off. Rather than trying to undo it and put some WD-40 there and clamp it in the vise and get the big Stilsons out, and you could also hammer it to free up the thread. It's a lot of work. I mean, it's a decent piece of brass, it's worth getting, but I just tend to cut through one side with the grinder, same on the other side, and then hit it with a sledgehammer much quicker. Let me show you. Now we'll spin it round and do the same on the other side. And now we take it over to a hammering point. I sometimes use this piece of railway track, but I've also got a U section here which is quite handy. So I just balance it so that the impact is going to be on the weakest part, and then a bit of a hit with a hammer. Okay, that took a few hits, but you can see how easy it is. And the more of that sort of scrapping you do, the easier it gets. You work out where the weak points are, you work out how hard to swing the hammer, and that weighs a bit over a kilo. So we're talking about $7 or $8 worth of brass here. Not bad for spending a couple of minutes with the grinder and 1 or 2 hits with a hammer. So I'm going to clean up the rest of it and then we'll have a look in another box of bits I brought back from the farm that look pretty interesting. So this heavy bit of girl pipe can just go with our heavy melt steel, and this lovely piece of brass into our crate of big bits of brass. Now that we've finished processing all the scrap brass and the plumbing fittings, let's do an unboxing of the stuff I brought back from the farm that I found under the bench in the workshop that wasn't plumbing fittings. Now there's stuff here that's I considered at the time better value than scrap metal and certainly not rubbish. We'll go through it. We'll try and have a bit of a guess at some prices. We might clean them up and get back to you with a quick list of what value we're likely to have in this box. This first one is like a petrol pump nozzle. They were often used for kerosene out of and diesel and gas or petrol from overhead fuel tanks on farm. This one appears to still work. It's a bit stiff. It's cast aluminium. I think that's aluminium. Brass fitting, brass handle by the looks of it. But it's going to be much better value through the shop as scrap. I will wash that up. It's not going to need much. I'll just give it a bit of a wash with fine steel wool in soapy water. We'll have a look at that at the end. Maybe I might just buff up the brass fitting here. I don't think we'll go to too much trouble. I should get $20 for that, so much better than scrap value there. Now these are in another box. They came from the farm. I put them on top of this one to include in this lot because I am going to clean these up. They're 1960s anodized aluminium bed reading lamps, and they're in really good condition other than just being filthy dirty. They will clean up really nicely. I can't see any damage other than they are missing the spring-loaded sort of clamp that clamps onto your bed head. I quite often get these lamps in very average condition, which I should be able to salvage the spring clamp for it. So whilst I can clean them up and test them and have them working, I can't really sell them until I have the proper clamp on the end. So sooner or later I'll get one of those. But they will clean up really well. They're going to be probably $30 at least once they're cleaned up. Although I can see a bit of a crease across here. That's a shame. The aluminium is quite soft. But I think that'll still look nice. So we'll clean those up and show you what they look like. Now what have we got in here? There's some various tools. That looks like a really early buggy axle spanner or a tyre lever that end, although buggies didn't have tyres, they had steel rims. Not sure, it's a very early tool all the same. Again, I'll give that a really quick scrub up just to present it clean. It doesn't have to be, we might even spray it with clear lacquer just to give it a bit more appeal. At least $10 there. That looks like an extension mirror for like when you're towing a caravan. I think you strap these on to your normal car mirror to give you extra reach. So, because quite often the caravans were wider than the cars. I don't know if they still are, but anyway, that's it's a towing mirror. There you go. Now I think we've only got the one of those, but I'm just going to put $5 on it in the shop. It's too good to throw out. Someone might have a use for it. Here we have a classic wool bale hook in very good condition. That'll clean up nicely. $10 there. This is a vintage die cast or cast zinc ratchet for a socket set. You'd have to have a fitting that goes into there and then you plug your socket on. I don't think I've got any of the other fittings for it. I can't see a brand on it. It's just stamped with some numbers there. Probably $5. Look, it's a vintage tool. It probably still works. I think it's a bit stiff. Actually, it may not be a ratchet because I can't see how we can... Oh, well, you wouldn't have to reverse it because you just spin it over. It's double-sided. So it probably is a ratchet. We might try something in there and see. Here we go. Here's an extension from a half-inch drive socket set. So that fits there perfectly. And, oh yeah, it turns one way and won't turn back. A little bit clunky in the ratchet action. Probably just needs a bit of lube. And if we then put it in the other side, we've got the opposite ratchet. Not sure how good it is. We'll put it in the shop at $5. Someone might just buy it as a collectible. It's only worth a few cents as scrap metal. Okay, we have some bearing housings here. NSK bearing housing. That one still has a bearing in it. That's a self-centering bearing or self-aligning. The bearing actually feels quite new. Don't know that it's ever been used. So these will certainly sell. I'm not going to keep these ones here because they're so large. They're probably off, well, for agricultural machinery. I'm never going to fabricate anything in my shed that's going to need bearings this heavy duty. So we'll put those in a box. I don't think there's any more. Oh, there is another one. Here we have I think they call it a pillow block bearing. Again, it's self-aligning. Even though it's painted green, it's probably a spare part from some machinery that's never ever been used, so it's probably new old stock. So we'll put these in a box. We're going to get at least, I reckon we'd get $20 for these, because if you go to a bearing shop and buy something that size, I'm sure it would cost a lot more than $20. That housing's still quite good. That bearing still feels as new. So yeah, 20 bucks or so there. Okay, we have some truck clearance lights. They look new old stock as well. I'm not sure that they've ever been used. So we'll give them a bit of a wash up. I quite often put a lot of automotive lights and things in a box at a, $10 the lot or something like that. So we'll see if we get any more of those, and we'll group them together. A little Stanley plane, number 130, quite rusty. It looks like you could put the blade in this end as well, so it's a reversible blade assembly. I don't know if that's rare model number. It's lost the knob off the end there. I don't know if it's broken or not. Don't think so. It would probably clean up fine. I'm not going to go to the trouble of restoring that one. I don't have time. I could buff it. I could take it apart and buff it up. I did that on one other video. I think I'll just wash it so it's clean and put it in the shop as a little project for someone. Look, I'll check the model number. We might just put $10 on it, depending on how it washes up. If it happens to be a rare one, we'll put a bit more. We'll get back to you on that. The blade doesn't look damaged. All right, here's some Massey Ferguson parts. Are they bearings or oil seals? Oh, they're a needle roller bearing. So brand new old stock Massey Ferguson bearings. This one might be the same, is it? Yeah, another needle roller bearing. So they will probably have a market. I don't know what particular model they will suit. They will be for a tractor. I would imagine a tractor. Could be. Massey Ferguson did make other machinery. There's no part numbers on them, so it might be a bit hard to identify. But we could still put them in the shop at $5 a pair. Someone that's into their farm machinery would probably recognise them. Here's an older clearance light from a truck or something, metal housing. Yeah, we'll probably get $5 for that one alone, being a vintage one. And this is an oil stone, quite well worn. The timber block's still okay. We'll wash that up. We might go $5 on that. An old shifter, a Fuller, extra strong, 12-inch shifter, 300mm. It looks like it was left out in the weather, well, probably buried in the soil somewhere. It was misplaced, it was lost, and it's spent a long time. And I think it's beyond fixing up. Well, nothing's ever beyond fixing up, but I'm not going to try. Whether we consider it scrap, it's only worth a few cents. Whether we put it in the shop in the $1 spanner box, that's probably the best option. Someone will grab it for $1. And whether they restore it or whether they just hang it up as a decoration in their shed. But I'm not going to worry about that for any more than $1. This little handle is off. It's the end of a serving tray. The old serving trays had these handles with a nice decorative bracket that goes down, whether they be timber or... Oh, they usually were timber. And sometimes I had a little post and rail fence around them. So that's useful because I quite often fix up those trays, so I will hang on to that one. Here we have a little clamp. Well, actually, it's not a clamp. It's probably like a valve spring compressor. Certainly a tool with something in mind for compressing. I reckon probably valve spring. I'll give that a bit of a quick clean up, maybe just $5. Here we have a good bearing in here. new old stock bearing. It looks like it's a tapered bearing. That's a smaller size. There's a chance I would probably use one that size, so I might keep that here. I've got a box for bearings. A claw hammerhead. Looks pretty rough. We might just put that in the $1 box. Again, it's much better than scrap metal price. Here's a really nice brass tap. It's branded Fidian by the looks of it. It would have been a barrel tap to tap into a wooden barrel. It's actually tapered, and it has basically a filter. So that's a really nice early tap. It's probably late 1800s. Nice brass casting. Will clean up very nicely indeed. I'm probably going to put about $20 on that. We'll see how well it cleans up. Okay, a few more things. There's a little Bakelite switch cover. I do keep those because I need them every now and again. A metal funnel, quite dirty, maybe homemade looking at the solder, or at least it's been repaired. Funnels sell quite well. We'll give that a quick wash up. Possibly $10 on that one. This large thing is, I know it as a briquette fork. It's possibly called a coal fork. It's actually pretty good. It's a bit rusty, but all the tines are okay. It's obviously hasn't got a handle, but I'll sell that as is. I'll just give it a dust off basically, but we'll probably get $10 for that. If I had it complete with a handle, we'd get 30 or 40, but I'm not going to bother fitting a handle. We'll just go $10 on that. Some brass taps. I usually sell the brass taps if they're presentable and they work well. These ones, yeah, it's going to be a challenge to get them off. I'll see if they undo. If they undo, we'll get $5 per tap, which is better than brass price. If there's any issues with them, it feels okay. Yeah, I might take them off. We'll get $5. We don't need that plastic fitting there. Yeah, the taps will always sell better than scrap price unless they're damaged. Some soldering irons. I do get quite a lot of these. They do clean up quite nicely. You've probably seen me do a few in a recent video. The copper does buff up very nicely. I'm very careful not to buff the solder because this old solder had lead in it, and you don't want to buff the lead. You're going to have contamination in the atmosphere that you should not breathe. You do have to be careful buffing anything on the buffer, as far as probably should wear a mask or something, or at least be well ventilated. These will clean up quite well depending on the brands on them. That's probably going to be a $10 one, the bigger one. So $10 or $5, that will add up to quite a bit. An early implement spanner. It's obviously had an issue with that end. It's broken one of the jaws of the spanner off. Possibly a hand-forged spanner, quite an early one. I'll just wipe it over basically. It's clean enough to sell as it is. Probably maybe $10. Might be pushing it given that it's broken. If it wasn't broken, I'd go 15 to 20. We might just put 5. It's still better than scrap money. Another brass tap, quite a large one. This is much bigger than normal. So I think that's at least a $10 tap. Another older style half-turn tap. They're just on a taper, so they free up quite easily. It just needs a bit of a tap on that end. That'll be a $5 tap. And we have some brass tap handles here. I do hang on to these as well because quite often you get the taps that just have the square shank on the top of the spindle, and one of these, I guess they're probably called a key or a handle anyway. So I'll hang on to those because when I do get a tap that needs them, I'll add it to it. Federal fuse. I do hang on to these too. You've seen me clean up fuse boxes before, and sometimes a fuse is either missing or broken, so I do have a box for those. Another tap handle. This one looks like it's probably cast iron. A couple of lengths of old chain. And this stuff actually sells very well. I'll get $5 per length. They're only 18 inches, 2 feet long. Very well worn. Actually, that's quite pitted. It's probably been lying in the dirt for a long time and it's rusted. But that gives it a nice appeal. People buy these to hang pot plants in their fernery area. They just look nice and rustic. So 2 bits of chain, $5 each. This looks like a crankshaft clamp. It's got a part number on it. I'm not sure. Probably for many general small engines, if you want to clamp and hold the crankshaft, it would work. You can see it's got a spot for the key, and perhaps that's to put a 1/2-inch socket drive bar in there, so you actually can hold the crankshaft solid while you're perhaps trying to undo the flywheel at the other end. I will hang on to that. It'll be a handy small engine tool, just needs a bit of a clean up. And the last thing in this box, other than an old soldering iron that's probably not much good, that might be just scrap metal, that one. This is an interesting piece. When we were kids, we used to melt lead on a little gas heater in the shed. Dad used to help us, and I don't remember if we actually made sinkers for fishing, or we just melted scraps of lead from old batteries just to make little ingots. And I think we sold some for scrap. It probably sparked my initial interest in scrapping. This is a very, very heavy piece of metal, and it's actually the base from a World War II era bomb. Now, my mum's father, who I guess I would have called Pop or something, he died the year I was born, so I never knew him. He worked in a munitions factory during the war, and somehow some of the stuff ended up at the farm. So it must have been cut down at one stage, and it makes an absolutely indestructible crucible for melting things. Dad must have welded a little handle on it, and I can remember melting lead in that when I was a young bloke many, many years ago. So I'm probably going to keep that just for history's sake, memories. And I may even be able to melt something in it. It's probably a bit thick, really, as a crucible, because it would have taken hours to get hot enough to melt lead. Anyway, I'll hang on to that one for now. I'm not going to sell that one. That's the end of our box. So I'll clean up a few things here. We'll do a bit of a list and see how much value we got. And here's everything cleaned up. How did you go? What value do you reckon we've got out of this one box? There wasn't anything outstanding, but there was quite a bit of saleable stuff. The actual plane, the Stanley plane, it's a number 130, and it actually cleaned up much better than I expected. All I did was wash it, and it's in pretty usable condition. It would just need a little bit of dismantling, a bit of lube, and it'd certainly clean up better. It is missing the front knob, but it cleaned up pretty well. So I think I went for $30 on that. No, actually I went for $20. We want to sell it quick, and I've got a few planes in stock at the moment. The bedside lamps cleaned up very well. You can see there's a little bit of denting to the top of that one, but they cleaned up well. I haven't got globes for them at the moment, but I've checked all the electrics, even cleaned the original cord up. I reckon we'll go $30 on those, and I will find a mounting bracket thing for it at some stage. Everything else is pretty well as suggested. This tap, have a look at how good this tap cleaned up. That's just buffed on my wire wheel, and it is absolutely amazing condition. It will get a little bit of a tarnish fairly soon, which will just add to its appeal. I don't normally like things polished too much. They look new, but this certainly doesn't look like a reproduction. And the tap works beautifully. I went for 25 on that. It should sell fairly quickly. The soldering irons cleaned up okay. I think I went 10 and just 5 on the others. The nozzle didn't clean up quite as well as I thought. I didn't bother about cleaning up the fitting at the end. So I went 25 on that though. This spanner, I only went back to $5. It's actually got a crack through the end there. Looks like it's been ground. It could easily be welded up, but I just went $5. So there we go. There's all our stuff. I straightened up the bearings in their holders. They should sell quite well. So let's go to the notepad. What totals? We got $265. Not bad from one box of junk from under the old workbench at the farm. Pretty well as most of the prices I suggested. So nothing outstanding, just a lot of quite saleable stuff. It cleaned up pretty easily. Some of it I really didn't do any more than just wipe it over. And others I just washed in warm soapy water. So we can get that in the shop now and start selling it off. And the last thing we're going to talk about in this video, and something else that came out from under the bench in Dad's old workshop, is this diesel injector pump. It's a fuel pump from a Sift tractor. That's S-I-F-T. They were a French-made tractor. Dad said they had one at the farm. I think he said they bought it in the late 40s. I'll have to check with that. We did find the manual for it, and I'm not sure where it is at the moment. But I decided I'm going to try this on eBay because it's got to be a pretty rare piece. And if anyone's trying to restore an old 1940s or 50s Sift tractor and they need an injector pump, where would you find one? So I'm going to clean this up just a little bit. It's obviously a little bit rusty in the fittings here. It does still turn over. It's not seized. So I reckon that would be very sought after by, well, let's be honest, by a very small amount of people, but that one person might be absolutely thrilled to get this to finish his tractor restoration. I'm going to try it on eBay. We'll look at that in the next episode. As irony aluminium, you'd probably get a couple of dollars for it, and it would be a shame for that history to be lost to the scrapyards. So we'll get back to that one in the next episode. So thanks for watching, guys. It's another episode of the Great Farm Cleanup done. Unboxings, it's a bit of a theme. I've got lots of stuff to unbox. Some of it I've packed up, and the stuff from the farm I've obviously packed up, but then I didn't know what was under the workbench to begin with, so it's a voyage of discovery for all of us. So I hope you enjoyed this. You can see we've got a bit of value here out of stuff which other people would consider junk. We're getting some money back to Mum and Dad as we clear the farm out. So next episode we'll have a look at what this injector pump does on eBay. We might find some other things to eBay as well, and we've got to get back to the farm soon for another drive over there and another cleanup adventure. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video. Bye for now.